Hey, welcome back to my channel. My name is Misty Smith, and I am a licensed professional counselor, and I provide exclusively online therapy for people in Michigan and Florida. And today I wanted to explore some topics that oftentimes my clients come to me struggling with. One of them being boundaries. I think boundaries is kind of a hot topic. You hear about it a lot, especially on apps like TikTok or whatever the case may be. But a lot of times when clients come to me, they don't really have a clear understanding of what boundaries are, what they should look like, how to maintain them, etc., etc. And so if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, please listen to this video. I would love if you would click the like button and obviously subscribe to my channel if you want more mental health content. But for right now, let's talk in depth about boundaries. So boundaries at their core are an invisible line in the sand that you draw to keep your physical, mental, and emotional health safe space. They are basically imaginary lines that put barriers between you and things that maybe are not appropriate or healthy for you. And they can look a lot of different ways. They help you maintain distance from things that create harm or are emotionally unsafe for you. Usually people, but could be places, things, all of those kinds of things. Boundaries require a few things. They require effective communication. They require effective prioritization of self. And they encourage others to prioritize you and your emotional health as well. So one of the first things I want to talk about is, what do boundaries look like? And the truth of the matter is, this is going to vary from person to person and boundary to boundary. It really just depends on what the circumstances are and what the needs are. Some boundaries might be something like setting a boundary that you won't discuss politics at family dinner because everybody's on different sides of the political scale, and it just creates chaos. And so you set a boundary that you're not going to engage in that conversation. Another boundary might be not going out one night a week with your friends in order to engage in some self-care and just have a night to yourself. Another boundary might be that you require your kid to be home by 10 p.m. to make sure that he's safe and he or she is safe and in bed and ready for school the next day. And so maintaining distance and not spending time with family members or other people that cause you harm are also boundaries that you might explore. And so again, boundaries can look a lot of different ways, and may be different from person to person. So let's talk about misconceptions. I think that oftentimes people have misconstrued or not factual ideas of what boundaries actually are. And so I want to talk about some common myths. In my opinion, the biggest myth surrounding boundaries is this idea that it is somebody else's responsibility to maintain that boundary. You heard that right. It is not their responsibility to maintain the boundary. It is actually yours. Boundaries may look like a line that's causing someone else's behavior, or that you're expecting a certain behavior or a certain modicum of respect or whatever from the other person. But at the end of the day, if they're not able to maintain that boundary, then what you are effectively saying is that if they're not able to hold that safe space for you, then that is your cue to exit stage left. And so let me give you some examples. You're the one who needs to change the situation and respect your own boundaries. And so let's say that you set a boundary that you don't want to listen to your divorced parents badmouth each other. Obviously that can cause a lot of emotional and psychological damage, particularly if you're a kid. But in any situation, you don't want to hear your parents talking shit about each other. And so you go to your parents and you say, with all due respect, it causes me harm when we engage in negative talk about mom or dad or whatever. And so I'm setting a boundary that when we're together, I don't want to have this conversation. One of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to adhere to the boundary, and that's awesome. They're not going to shit talk each other. And obviously, that's the desired outcome. But the opposite might happen. They may not maintain the boundary, and one of them may continue to disparage or make negative remarks about the other one. And if that happens, then that is your time to decide your course of action in order to maintain that boundary for your own safe space. And so that might look like forcing a change of conversation and not allowing them to engage in that conversation. It might look like leaving and saying, unfortunately, we aren't able to have lunch today, or because this topic came up and I've expressly asked you not to talk about this, I would just prefer, if we not go to family dinner. Or it might look like complete and total removal of the person, or having some distance between you and them for a while until they're able to hold those boundaries. And so that is probably the most common misconception, is the idea that boundaries are for the other person. And that, again, that's not true. We can't control other people's behavior. We can't control what they say or what they do or what they think. But what we can say is that if you can't maintain this boundary with me and keep me emotionally and mentally and physically safe, then I need to take action steps that will ensure, again, my physical, mental, and emotional safety. There are some other misconceptions. Oftentimes people think that if they set a boundary, that means that they're being rude, or that people will be put off by them and it will push them away. And I'm going to argue the opposite. I think that when you have really solid and effective boundaries, it enhances relationships because it sets a parameter for both you and the person that you're in the relationship with. It sets a structure for the relationship. Somebody who is mentally healthy, someone who genuinely cares and has your best interests at heart, is going to maintain and respect your boundaries. If you find that someone is pulling away from you, or if they comment to you that they don't understand, or they think you're being dramatic or whatever, then I'm going to be honest, they're not your people. They're just not. They don't have your best interests at heart. And whether that's an after effect of their own mental health and maybe some struggles they're having, or they just frankly don't give a shit about you and you're just kind of now figuring that out. At the end of the day, if they can't appropriately and effectively make an effort to maintain those boundaries with you, then they're not your people. Some other misconceptions is this idea that a boundary has to be forever. And again, that's not necessarily true. It may be, may 100% be. You may require and demand effective communication with your partner for the duration of your relationship, which obviously, hopefully, is forever. Or you may have boundaries that are going to ebb and fade over time. You may set a boundary that your 15-year-old needs to be in the house by 8 p.m. on a school night. But obviously that boundary is going to change as your child gets older and eventually moves out of the house and all of those things. And so boundaries don't have to be forever. They can ebb and flow with the relationship and as things change. So I think that's really important to recognize that you can change the boundaries. You may become more healthy and able to manage some of those conflicty things. Going back to my earlier, point, maybe you get to a place where listening to your family, talk about politics doesn't make you feel some type of way. And then you say, okay, you guys can have these conversations and I'm able to hear and be a part of it. So again, boundaries don't have to be forever and they can change over time. Another common misconception is that you should only have boundaries with quote unquote bad people. And this one is absolutely untrue. You should have effective and clear boundaries in every single relationship you have, whether it's, a family relationship, a friendship, a professional relationship, a romantic relationship. You should have clear and concise boundaries in all of them. And the reason for this is because, again, boundaries are a structure and a framework for a healthy relationship, but boundaries are also one of the ways that we make sure that the relationship itself and our relationship style is healthy. So this can be a whole nother video on its own, but basically we've all heard of codependency, right? Or maybe you've heard of like anxious or avoidant attachment styles. And those are basically just fancy words to say that the way you engage in relationships and the value that you place on yourself versus other people is skewed. And so you want healthy boundaries within relationships in order to maintain healthy, interdependent relationships. If you don't have appropriate boundaries, or you don't model appropriate boundaries, or you allow yourself to kind of circumvent your own boundaries, or you cross boundaries with other people, what that inherently says is that you're not respecting them, or they're not respecting you, or however that came to be. So again, I think it's really important to recognize that you should have boundaries with everyone, and you should, maintain and expect that they maintain boundaries with you as well. And so that kind of brings me to my final point. What does maintaining a boundary say about you? It says a few things. It says that you are confident in yourself and that you know what you require from the relationship. It says that you are working inherently to provide a safe physical, mental, and emotional space for yourself. And adhering to a boundary for another person shows that you are committed to maintaining their safe space. And so again, it shows the work that you are doing and kind of that healthy mindset. And I'm also going to say, and I had this conversation, this is shared with permission, talking to a client the other day, and we were talking about boundaries. And one of the things that we commented on was keeping boundaries within yourself, setting boundaries that further you to your goals, and what it means when you don't adhere to boundaries, whether it be for other people or whether it be for yourself. But one of the kind of conversation pieces was this idea of, I set these boundaries for myself. I tell myself that I'm going to get a good night's sleep. I tell myself that I'm not going to call my ex. I tell myself that I'm not going to go out with people that I don't feel comfortable with, but then I do it anyways. And what that inherently says is that you're not valuing yourself. When you don't adhere to your own boundary, what you are technically saying, whether it's explicit or not, is, I'm not worth it. I'm not worthy. I'm not valid. There's no reason to maintain this boundary. And so again, maintaining appropriate boundaries, even when it's difficult, means you recognize and prioritize yourself and your emotional, mental, and physical safe space. What does maintaining a boundary mean about them or not? So what does it mean when someone else either does or doesn't maintain a boundary that you've set up? If they're able to maintain that boundary or make a concerted effort to do so, then it shows that they care. They want to empower you. They want to maintain the boundaries that you've set forth. They want to respect your position in that relationship. And if they don't, if they're unable to maintain that boundary, then again, like I said earlier, it may be for a lot of reasons. It may be their own mental health. It may be their own relationship and attachment style. It may simply be because they're not your people. But what I keep coming back to is this idea that if they're not able to maintain that boundary for you, then frankly, they're not your people. And that's your cue to exit stage left, because it's important to recognize the space that someone is trying to hold within themselves. And to use the age-old analogy, you want people that are serving your purpose and adding value to your life. If you're watering dead plants, then they're not providing any oxygen for you right then and there. And so these are people that, frankly, they're just not part of you. They're not good for you. They're not holding an appropriate space for you. Maybe that can change, again, like anything else, with their own growth and with their own understanding and effective and clear communication. Maybe they can learn to do a better job at maintaining those boundaries. But if you find that someone in your life is having a difficult time, or is completely and expressly disregarding all of the boundaries that you have set in place, take stock of that and think about whether or not that is a person that in this moment needs to have that much access to you. And so again, these are just some overall ideas and concepts about boundaries. boundaries is an issue that I talk about with my clients probably on a daily basis, and the majority of my clients are working on developing effective and clear boundaries both for themselves and for their relationships around them. And so again, like I said in my last video, one of the best ways to work on boundaries and one of the best ways to kind of identify and develop your relationship style and become healthy and independent and keep your own self emotionally and physically and mentally safe is to talk to a therapist. And so, as always, while these are great tips, this is just the beginning of the, it's the tip of the iceberg. And so I highly recommend, if you are struggling with boundaries, if you think that this is something that maybe you need a little bit more help on or more information, then I would strongly encourage you to find a therapist in your area to work on this with you, because a good therapist is going to be able to walk you through these and help you establish and set clear boundaries for the relationships in your life. So I hope that this was helpful. Again, I love talking about this stuff. I absolutely love providing this knowledge and helping people to create safe and effective boundaries and relationships in their life. So if this was helpful, please give this video a like, subscribe if you're interested, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. As I always say, if there's anything that you would like me to talk about, if there's any concepts or areas of mental health that you would find interesting or that you want some more information on, leave me a comment. I am absolutely willing to upload videos about all areas of mental health. So again, I hope y'all have a good day, and thank you for watching this video.